All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tinkerbell contributor / community meeting. Today is June 7th. We are on meeting 54. I don't see any new folks. Although I don't know, Steve, you've been around a while, but I don't know if you've been to some of these meetings before, right?
I've listened in. I tried to join once. This is the first time I've had success.
Oh, okay. Well, awesome. Glad that you're here and able to join this way. I notified in the Slack channel earlier. We will be recording this. We do have a code of conduct. Please do check that out. It is in the agenda. Posting the agenda in the Slack channel right now. All right. So show and tell. There are no written down items, but anybody have any show and tell things they'd like to bring up? Nope.
I mean, I'll put it in for discussion. I don't have any actual to show, but I have something that vaguely touches on that. I'll put in the now I have a topic which will help you feel better, Jacob.
Thank you. Thank you. There is the second part of show and tell is just a general tell. I don't know actually the difference between the tell and a topic, but yeah, I guess you can pair it wherever you want. Hey, Avinav, welcome.
Hey, Jacob. Hey, guys.
Oh, somebody asked something to share.
Yeah, last minute share. This is what it looks like to have that CNCF service desk. These are the open tickets. This is proof that I'm not making it up. Like these things are being tracked, but just kind of going slow right now. So hopefully 1 week we'll end up with our calendar and Zoom links dedicated to these functions to users in dev, and some official response regarding Rufio.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Marcus. That is very important work. I hope we get heard back from soon. Awesome. All right. Any other? I'll give a last call. Any other show and tell topics? All right. We will jump into the massive list of topics that I have.
Just before you do that, I did wonder, maybe folks would like to know how Rufio is working.
Yeah, definitely.
I haven't got a demo, but
You could tell.
I could tell.
Do the tell.
Is a show a prerequisite to a tell? I don't know.
We could change it to show and or tell.
There you go. Yeah, the bar is really low. Yeah, don't read too heavy into the and. Yeah.
I'll just give a quick overview of the way it's designed for right now, at least. So, in short, the main part of it that actually triggers external behavior is modeled as jobs, similar to the Kubernetes job. And Rufio, sorry for the recording, is a component that's going to be interacting with baseboard management controllers but implemented as a Kubernetes controller. So yeah, the BMC job that we've defined is like a Kubernetes standard library job, standard type job, and you submit it with a set of tasks on its spec. Those actions, on its spec, those actions get translated one at a time. They must run to completion. So there's a deterministic ordering. They get translated to a BMC action, which just represents one action, one thing to do, a power off, or at the moment it's power off or boot device order, one-time boot device order. That needs to run to completion. That's handled by a separate controller. And then the BMC job controller will receive an update about that action, find out what the action, it gets the type that it's associated with, finds the next action, creates that action, and then carries on working its way through the job like that. And that seems to be working really well. It brings about determinism, which we think might have been one of the problems with PBNJ, because it launched stuff async as jobs, but it's kind of a different topic. But Yeah, I can see Jacob upset. But anyway, it's going really well. And there's one other aspect, which is we've turned into a read-only API. We have a baseboard management type that currently represents existing power state as configured in the BMC. We're kind of putting that to one side for the minute because the BMC job capability is really what we need. But yeah, we would like to be able to reflect the state of the machine on this baseboard management read-only type and see where that goes. Possibly introduce some other things with that in the future to do with write behavior. But yeah, that's the overview. A little bit of a convoluted overview, but yeah, that's the overview.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Sorry, not to trivialize what you just said, but the name Rufio has stuck so far and still going strong, it looks like. So that's good as well.
I'd chant the name, but I don't want to get us more entrenched.
Awesome. Any questions or comments or things around Rufio? Anybody else? I will throw, I guess, one other already concrete use case we have around Rufio is for CAPT, right? The integration into CAPT is a lot, I don't know what the right word is here, easier maybe, or familiar might be the right word, with Rufio as compared to PB&J. So it does open up some of that functionality into CAPT, which is, I think, a good thing. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Any other show and or tell items? All right. Oh, question, curious, Steve said, curious if Rufio will support vendor-specific things like BMC updates or perhaps configuration management. Good question.
Unclear at this time.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up real quick. I
There's-
think there's some
two different
stated
aspects
goals
to-
already.
Yeah, there's two aspects to that. Like one is like architecturally, do those things fit into the architecture? Because that's a different question than like if as long as there's no architectural reason not to allow it to go in, that's separate from like if it could go in, is anyone actually going to work on it, which is a separate question. So even if no one's going to work on it, does the architecture leave room for that stuff? Or is that logically a different thing? I think is an interesting way to ask the question. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts?
I think anything to do with BMC would fit into it. Where my mind starts going is how much control do you really want to give a Kubernetes controller over your BMC? Like, I don't know, just like, let's talk about a firmware update. Do you really want that doing a firmware update? Like, probably, in my mind, that's dangerous. But so are basically any interactions with the BMC. So I don't know. Yeah, definitely something worth raising as an issue, and humoring for consideration, I think.
I posted in the chat, the Zoom chat. It currently the Rufio, the repo does have some stated goals. I don't think those are set in stone by any means. I think those are just current state. And it does talk about certificate configuration as kind of like a future scope. So there is some configuration already has already been brought up as a potential future state. So, does that leak into new stuff? Who knows? And going back to something Nahum said, honestly, I feel like a lot of it could come down to like, if somebody has time to do the work, it probably will make it in, right? I think that's kind of how a lot of the Tinkerbell project is at the moment too. So, but again, that personal opinion. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for the question, Steve. Nice to see you join us, Chris, and immediately give us a nice zinger there. So good job. All right. let's jump into topics. Let's go bottom to top. Nahum, you want to start us off?
That's one way to do it. All right. So a thing I learned, I tweeted it out the other day, is the Jaeger team is all in on OTLP, the Open Telemetry line protocol. I don't know what that actually stands for, but so Jacob, you might remember from back when you were at Equinix Metal, like we've done work on wiring up Open Telemetry tracing in a lot of the Tinkerbell code. Equinix Metal is using it in production. In production, we use an OTel collector, which adds additional annotations before sending it off to our vendor, which happens to be Honeycomb. But in principle, and there's some of the repos even have some of my like scaffolding for here's how to turn up a local collector and Jaeger all in one, so you can have a web UI to look at the OpenTelemetry traces. And I now know that you can skip the collector entirely, and you could just stand up a properly configured Jaeger all in one, the latest version, set an environment variable saying, please turn on OTLP, open up the right ports, and you can just send OTel native tracing straight into the Jaeger all in one. It occurs to me that that might be a good fit for adding to the Docker Compose for the sandbox of standing up an all-in-one, so that you could see spans coming in. And in particular, given how much other stuff we've put into place, if we add additional OpenTelemetry tracing into various points, one thought I had in particular was it could be really interesting for workflow stuff to result in spans and traces, and being able to like not even necessarily need to see logs, but being able to see like the full flow of like a machine booted and then it went through and ran a workflow, and seeing the relationship between those things in a web UI like Jaeger could be really interesting. There's still a lot of work of OpenTelemetry. I don't know if there's any OpenTelemetry in the Tink server, Tink worker stuff, because that stuff's not yet in Equinix Metal production. So like we haven't had the drive to put that in there. But certainly things like Boots have it, and there's some in there for Hagel. I don't know if the Tinkerbell side of Hagel has it yet or not. I was gonna do an experiment with it, and then I realized, oh, this is actually more work than I thought it was, and maybe a new release of the sandbox is coming, so I backed off from it. But if others are interested, I can look into that at some point to see if that is useful to others as well. If nothing else, it could be interesting. An interesting way to see just like even Boots logs, instead of having to look at Boots logs, just being able to see them in the web UI out of the box, rather than having to go and dig up the Docker logs.
Yeah, I like that. I think it would be pretty awesome. If you haven't seen it or messed with any kind of open telemetry distributed tracing stuff, it's pretty awesome. So highly recommended. But yeah, I think that would be really cool, especially lightweight enough that you don't need like the collector plus Jaeger, and like if you can just send it all, that's actually pretty cool.
Single container. Yeah. Speaking of which, that reminds me, I did a talk internally on adding OpenTelemetry tracing to Golang services. Some of it points to I think I even shared a link to the slide markdown in the channel from the Go Hotel channel in the Slack. That is maybe of interest also in terms of getting familiar with how we added it and how we like initialize OpenTelemetry, and how we add custom trace points and some pointers into examples in PB&J where we add additional like BMC annotations to see what's going on with the BMC. But yeah, I can probably put together a demo of that for the future. I should do that.
Awesome. I posted the link to your code in the agenda if y'all want to check it out. Thanks, Nahum. Any other questions or comments for Nahum? Sweet. All right. I'm next for quite a while. I'll try and go quick to not talk too much here. So the first item I had, I'm going bottom up if you're on the agenda. Repo help so I'm a maintainer of Boots, PB&J, Sandbox, DHCP, and iPixie Dust. This is just a call for folks currently on the call, or if you see this in the future. All those repos could really use help if you're interested in terms of becoming an approver or a reviewer. I say this mostly selfishly because as a maintainer, I can't approve my own stuff, right? So I am just making an open call. Please do hit me up on Slack or in one of the repos. I would love to have anybody that has time or interest to help me out. All right, jumping on to the next. So I think last community meeting, we talked about moving to incubating status. I think that some of the topic came up around what it gives us in terms of CNCF conferences, KubeCon and whatnot. And I looked briefly at what it would take or what it does take for us to get there. And I posted in the agenda a super brief synopsis of some of the high level stuff I found, and I'll just call them out right here. There's like 4 items kind of big items that I found. The first one was we have to document at least 3 independent end user use cases using Tinkerbell. So that's kind of a big one. I think independent users, I don't even know how they define that. So like, does Equinix count as an independent, or does AWS count as independent because we're so heavily contributing, or?
No, so there's a definition for like, these are cloud vendors. And so if your business is, you're in the business of selling cloud and cloud accessories, then no. If you are an auto manufacturer, if you're an airplane company, if you are a pharmaceutical company, you're an end user. Your business isn't making and delivering the hardware and information.
That makes sense. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so that one's a kind of a big one. Then I don't know if we have to go search. We'd have to go search those out because immediately, the top contributors aren't don't fall into independent. So, yep.
If there's things that Tinkerbell is rolled into and companies are using that, then those companies would also be using Tinkerbell. And so I think in the near future, there should be that story to tell.
That's true. Great point. So maybe that one will be easier than I initially thought. So
I think so.
Yeah. Awesome. The next big one was we have to have a healthy number of committers. Committers is defined as like people with access to actually merge PRs and things of that nature. I think that one's getting better. I'd love to see that one grow, hence my call out for folks to help get involved. But yeah, I think we're on the course for that. Next one is a substantial ongoing flow of commits and merges. I think that kind of falls into play with healthy number of committers. As those grow, the flow of commits and merges as well. I think we're not to say that we're not doing well. I think we're doing well, and I think we've increased, but I think we might need to grow a little bit more. And then the last big one was a clear versioning scheme. I think we're getting close to that ish, or we have partial of it at least, right? We have V0 something out there, but I don't know. Maybe we do capture it. But yeah, so those are the 4 kind of big ones I found. There are a few other ones, but that's just kind of the high level synopsis for us. If we want to move to incubating, we do have to like put in a request, and then we get like I'm going to butcher all these actual words here, but we get like a CNCF buddy that like works with us, and then they put our incubation request proposal to a vote, and so some of that kind of stuff happens. But a lot of that, in my opinion, was out of our hands. These kind of big points were the things we would probably want to focus on, and then administrative stuff will happen after that. So yeah, that's my brief findings that I found. Any other thoughts or ideas or knowledge anybody has around that they want to share?
we've got a proposal for the versioning scheme. So, and we're following it, which is 7ver. It's just not moving very quickly, but it's established.
Yeah, that's fair. It probably, yeah, we probably, maybe I'll ping some other maintainers on Slack. I think it might be a good idea to get maybe like another doc, Google Doc or something publicly available, but something to track our progress here, just so we know where we're at, and, you know, kind of check boxes might be helpful with like links, like just like you're doing, right? Clear versioning schema now, and then we have the link to like where we've done that, et cetera. Might be interesting to get that going, but yeah, maybe I'll ping on Slack and see what folks think.
Just on the note of versioning, I meant to do it the other week for Hegel, or we were chatting in Slack about it, but it would be nice if we could just release all services like as probably a minor increment bump. Like there've been significant changes across the board since that 0.6 tag. So I think, yeah, personally, I think we could probably benefit from just snapshotting all that hard work.
Yeah, that's actually the very first topic item I had. My suggestion was any, especially services or repos that implemented the Kubernetes backend, those would be really great candidates, in my opinion, to throw a tag on that. And I think we talked last time too, like tags are up to kind of the repo and the maintainers, and it doesn't need to be anything fancy. It can be just like you said, Chris, kind of a snapshot. So my call out would be to any maintainers. I think the general process, Chris, you did last time was good. Just kind of throw out into the community, hey, I'm going to do this. And then, you know, the scream test, see if anybody is up in arms. A tag shouldn't hurt anybody, but yeah, and then just kind of maintainers just go do it, I guess. Most, if I'm not mistaken, Jason Tiberius already put in all the work to do the automated tag flowing and release notes, et cetera. So most repos should already have that stuff ready to go.
I wonder if we should do a like knowledge sharing of just like, hey, here's how to tag a release. I have yet to tag a release. Maybe I'd love to watch someone else tag a release kind of thing, so that you can share the information about it. Here's how you, I mean, we can also write it up, but like whatever that is, the more people get comfortable with doing it, probably the more often it'll happen. And we'll find where are the bumps that we need to smooth it to make it easier.
You can watch me do it, even though I have no idea what I'm doing.
Back to the show and tell.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, most of the repos, Jason did a pretty good job. I'll post it here in the.
Is it literally just tag it and it'll automatically, all the things happen?
Yeah, he's got a little script that you run it with the tag name, and then you just push it straight to the origin. So you do need maintainer access permissions, but there's a GitHub action that will kind of do the rest of it. So, but yeah, I agree. It'd be watching somebody do it would be helpful too. But there is some docs
At the end of this, Chris will share one tiny little shell, and he'll run those commands, and we'll see.
Yeah, I'll do a live. I like it. Live tagging of Hegel. Let's do it. That's good.
Feel free to decline, Chris. I didn't mean to put.
Yeah. No obligation. But yeah. Sweet. Nice. Thanks for bringing that up, Chris, because that takes one of the items off of my list that I had talked about on the agenda. So topics. All right. Two other quick items I had. The removal of Equinix specific experimental labels in the readmes. So we removed Booth's one because, again, these were specific to Equinix. There's no reason why we can't put a Tinkerbell specific experimental if we wanted to, but in my opinion, I think we should just drop them for the moment. So if you're a maintainer of Tink, Hegel, or PB&J, just a light request, if you wouldn't mind PR to remove those, that would be much appreciated. Especially PB&J,
not experimental.
Yeah, PB&J's been running at Equinix Metal for quite a while.
Bearing. Yeah.
Same with Hegel's been in there for quite a while as well. So,
but it's the other chunk of the code base. So like it's
That's the same code base.
the code paths that are exercised in our production are not the code paths that are exercised in the sandbox for the most part, as far as I know.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, but again, like as an open source project versus the, I think those labels made a lot of sense when they were in like packet host repos for
Sure.
visibility to the outside world. But as an open source project, I think I agree that removing Equinix specific labels makes a lot of sense.
Just on the note of kind of cleanup, I think we probably want a conscious effort to isolate all the various configuration that's just arbitrary environment reads that comes from like packet repos and all sorts of other bits. Maybe isolate it behind a client wrapper that sets the environment variable before calling out to that and then unsets it after or something. I don't know, something that basically wraps it up and makes it so that we control the configuration in the way we want and expose it and isolate the problem of exposing it via an environment variable to like a single place, rather than having to configure a service with all of that. It's not clear that it's related to the service. Even when you're editing the code, it's like, why are we setting this sometimes? Does that resonate at all with anybody?
Yes.
I guess I'm curious. So I'm trying to make sure I fully understand. There's like, I imagine number one, like we probably have multiple different bits of code that are parsing environment variables in different places and in different ways that are not all the same. And it would be good to have a clean way that we're doing that, so that anytime an environment variable is being used, you would know exactly where to look for that in the code base. But I wasn't sure if you were also saying, and we would rather not use environment variables, and we'd rather read them into like from an environment variable into like a wrapper that puts them onto the command line or into a text file. And I wasn't clear if I misunderstood that part.
Yeah, that's me badly explaining it. In short, isolate configuration as a discrete concern so that it can be changed. And a way of achieving that with stuff that doesn't complement that philosophy, like a library, like I say, there's some, I don't know, library somewhere that we're using third party, and it arbitrarily reads environment variables.
Oh, so the OpenTelemetry stuff does that already, right? So anything using OTel init go is behind the scenes reading a couple of environment variables. So that's a really interesting point already.
It can do. I think some of the OTel stuff, I fiddled with a lot of OTel stuff in my last company. I don't know if you have to use environment variables. I think there might be ways of doing it without that.
There are. It's just so OTel init go is an Equinix metal specific. It's in Equinix Labs. There's OTel init go, which is basically to capture all the boilerplate of in Golang how to use the OTel. I think part of the OTel spec is if you were going to use environment variables, these are the ones you should use.
Yeah.
And there are 2 or 3 of them that OTel init go knows how to read and do all that boilerplate code, so you don't have to do it in every single repo. But
that's okay. Like we can work toward, like it's not going to happen in one overnight, right? You just gradually work towards, and we could like raise an issue in a third party repo and say, hey, would we be able to rework this to make the configuration more easier to work with or whatever, you know? And if it's open source, maybe contribute to it, whatever. But what we can do in the Tinkerbell repos, then we can just crack on with that and have a conscious effort there.
I'd say especially stuff we have control over, we should move away sooner. A good example, in my opinion, is the Tink clients. Now, this is old Tink client. If you're using Kubernetes backend, I don't think it matters. But the original Tink client, like if you were to call their client libraries, they would just read environment variables, but it was opaque as a end user if you imported that and use that function, what those libraries were, what the environment variables were, right? And I think if I'm not mistaken, Chris, the idea here is just to be more explicit. So instead of just having, I know it's easier for like a library to just set these things, but it's more confusing in my opinion on the client end when you go to import these. Like, what's being said, how is it being said? I have to go to an entirely different code base just to find out like what these things are, et cetera. And then I don't have control over their names either, right? So what if I've got conflicts, et cetera, right? So there's lots of concerns. But I think the example I bring up is Tink client does this. But they also have they have another function I feel like that kind of gets overlooked where you can explicitly pass these values in instead of doing it. So we do have this duality. I think we just should deprecate kind of the
even in
implicit one here.
Hegel, where it really stood out to me, Hegel's a really simple service, but even in Hegel, I had a big effort to strip all environment variable reads from throughout the code base and isolate it in one place. This is the configurability. Yet you still had to set arbitrary environment variables because libraries that we were depending on did these arbitrary reads, and it's like, oh crap! Now there's just totally inconsistent way of configuring Hegel, and I can't do anything about it. So I don't know. It's just good practice.
And certainly, I think OTel is different because like I think if you don't set it, it's just not going to do things. Like optional, I think is different. Having a library that has an optional one is different than having a required one that you can't find. And certainly I agree with you. If there's a required environment variable to start up the service, whose definition is nowhere in that service's code base, that is a problem.
Sure.
I think
Steve
there
brings
were,
up. Oh,
sorry, I
Dan.
think there were like three different things I wanted to bring up about that, which one was if there's undocumented environment variables, the way to surface that is through documentation first. And so we can say that, you know, in each repository that's affected by this, if it's PB&J or whatever, we can say that this is affected by OTel, go look over there for it. These are the environment variables that are meaningful here. If there was another, I thought there was maybe another ask in there to change that behavior or to change the environment variables. Whether or not, I feel like that's what was said somewhere in there. If that's the case, I think that the way to bring that up first would be as an issue rather than just open up a PR that gets merged and there was really no time for anybody to react to it. Like when we're talking about things that we know that there may be end users affected by it. So I just want to make sure that we're raising issues first and getting more attention on it from the people who need to be aware of it. The other thing that comes to mind is for PB&J, we're at version 0. Semantic v0, which is not a semantic version as far as I can tell, or maybe it is 0.0.0. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's a valid version number.
I'm not so sure. But anyway, I think that it would be kind to get a release out there that people can use before we would introduce any kind of breaking change on that particular project. Before introducing something like that. So if PB&J, if we were going to do some major work, maybe drop a tag in there first and O.O.1 and then or O.1.0, and then we can do all this other fun stuff and call it O2O.
The other thing you can do backwards compatibility. That's what I did in Hegel. It's just, it doesn't, like the old configuration I basically decided would support until 0.8. We haven't released 0.7 yet. So it'd be, there's a notice there. That's arguably that's too big for a major version 0. That's too much. Like you're within your remit to like publicize you're going to get rid of it in 0.7 and then just get rid of it. But I was trying to be nice.
Thank you for being nice.
Yeah, PB&J, 100%. I'll do that, Marcus. Great point. I didn't realize, I guess I took it for granted that Jason did so many other repo tagging, or you did, one of you two, that PB&J didn't get the benefit of those fancy tags. So
it's not in the sandbox as of today.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So it's like, we don't need it. Yeah, that's fair.
It's also,
that's fair.
Part of me is inclined to like, could that, so that one is quite load bearing at Equinix Metal. Arguably, it is I would call that a 1.0 type code base, because like we try to run the latest in production, which means, which is great because that means if anything breaks in it, like we find out and then it gets fixed. The downside of that is when it breaks, like we feel that pain. Yeah, so I think there's, I don't know, it's definitely a 1.0, but like there are definitely many servers that depend on that functionality. pretty daily. So breaking changes would be have been problematic for us. Yeah, so I don't know, just a nudge. I would nudge in the direction towards a 1.0 rather than a 0.1. But I could see it going either way.
Yeah, I think we should have a deeper conversation about what 1.0 means too. And maybe get a definition around that, because I think can be different for different folks. And it sounds like, at least from my aspect, it is different. But yeah, I'll ping you, Nahum. I'll ping the Slack channel too before I do anything crazy, I guess. So
I mean, you could always tag a 0.1 and then I could convince you to tag a 1.0 soon after that. There's no problem there too. The question
Okay.
is like, right,
Sure.
what is at what point do we tag it as a 1.0? And I'm saying, I think sooner rather than later, but doesn't have
Okay.
to be today.
Okay, that's fair. Awesome. So real quick, Steve brings up in the chat, we were talking about environment variables and whatnot, and I think he asked moving those to kind of be more explicit, would that allow validation? I'll throw that out to maybe Chris. I think the answer is yes, right?
Say that again, sorry. I was reading something
So,
else.
so we were talking about environment variables, right? Kind of pushing those to be in one place and more explicit, et cetera. Moving them out of third-party libraries, maybe into the client side. And Steve, I think at that time brought up, would that allow for validation?
I think it does. I mean, at the end of the day, a library, if you have a library and you define a function or a construct or anything that a consumer is going to consume, you should accept your data as parameters, and then the library validates that data. How you get that data is a discrete concern, typically given to the responsibility of a main or a derivative of main. It's not something that libraries generally should be dictating, in my opinion.
Hopefully that helps Steve answer that. Let's see. Marcus brings up, yeah, is asking if this is semi-related. PB&J issue 85. Yeah, definitely semi-related.
Just hit all the
That-
same keywords. I think it might not actually be related, but validation, environment variables, PB&J, I got bingo.
Yep. And I'll just to pile on to this. This was open June 24th, coming up on a year now. PBJ needs help. So if you got cycles, we could use it.
Yeah, I think I found a bug, so maybe I'll go fix that.
Yeah.
Just trying to get you to bite. Sorry, Jacob.
Awesome. Good conversation. See you, Steve. Thanks for showing up, man. Any other comments, questions around? We kind of went between removing experiment labels and then environment variables. So either of those have any other thoughts or comments? Thought that was a good conversation, though.
I'm very clear on what we should do in terms of the adding additional cutting versions. I'm less clear on what the course of action should be for the environment variables. One thing I gathered from Marcus was like, hey, if we depend on environment variables from libraries, adding that to our documentation would be a really good thing. So like very clearly anywhere where we've pulled in OTel init go, making sure that if nothing else, readme.md has some explanation of that. I wonder, like there's the discover, so there's a discoverability, like people often know, like if I just run the binary -- help, it'll tell me all the configurability that it accepts on the CLI. That won't tell you, hey, I also support these environment variables. If there were a way to register environment variables with that thing that generates the -- help, you could then somewhere also say, and here are the environment variables that I support. And by the way, this is what I currently see as you ran it off the CLI. I don't know if that also fits into a broader, like, also, I guess, Chris, I'm curious, were you thinking of making a library to do all that work to be used across the project? Or were you thinking, yeah, I'm curious, do you have more thoughts on like what the path forward would be?
So I'll be transparent. For me, yeah, packages shouldn't read environments. Simple as. That for me, if you're providing a library, your configuration should be given to you, not just arbitrarily read. And that reading is that configuration. Like if I want to pull it from etcd or from the environment or from a file or from the CLI, that's up to me. I'm writing the main func, not the library. So that's basically the mantra I do. And then with respect to existing libraries that already do it, if I can, I will isolate the environment variables to with a wrapper. Like I'll wrap the library in something, and then I will set the environment variable and maybe unset it when I'm making the invocation so that it has the configuration it needs. But that means that it's completely isolated to this one thing.
I see. You're talking about like os.set env of this and that, and then call the libraries whatever function, and then os.unset it to pull it out.
Sometimes that's not possible because libraries rely on init funcs, which again, in my view, are bad because it's like behavior by import. And I know OTel has done a bunch of that among other libraries. That's the philosophy they went, and I get it's a cross-cutting concern, but that's why I said when I looked into OTel, you can still use their tooling, their constructs and whatnot without relying on the init behavior. You can construct the exporters, you can construct stuff and give it the configuration that you've decided to pull in. So that's what I always do personally.
Okay.
Whether or not this org wants to adopt that philosophy
I mean, also like I could see a very reasonable position of like, hey, OTel init go is doing a lot of useful stuff. It currently has functions that read environment variables. A parallel function set of functions of like that doesn't use environment variables, that does the same things, possibly even without having to do the goofiness of setting environment variable, calling the function, whatever, might be a reasonable PR to stick into OTel init go and then move the Tinkerbell client, the Tinkerbell software, to all use that version of what OTel init go as a library provides. Because again, like the purpose of OTel init go is like make it so that it is very easy to use OTel in Go. And I think it should, like, it's fine for it to have an opinionated version of like, oh, if you set these environment variables and do this one thing, it'll work. If that's consistent with how you roll your software, great. But if not, like having another version that is consistent with how a different project wants to write all of its software. So for example, like you could imagine there's some software out there that uses 0 environment variables primarily, and like the only thing it needs is those environment variables for OTel, in which case, great, wrap it with the magic, set the environment variables, and off you go. If you have other software that's using lots of environment variables, then that magic becomes dangerous, as you're pointing out. So if anything, possibly a PR against OTel init go of like, here's a version of that function that requires you to explicitly pass those values in, and then moving some of that environment variable logic over into the initialization within the Tinkerbell project's software does seem totally reasonable to me.
It's worth pointing out. It's no different to the package state problem where you use packages with singletons, right? Most packages that do that, I mean, yeah, they can be kind of useful. Like Cobra does it, pflags does it, flags does it. Like they all do it, but it's kind of useful. I never use it. They all provide the ability to create the constructs independently of using the package state. That's really what I guess packages, in my opinion, should be designed to accommodate. But which is what you're describing, I think.
So back to my last question, which is, do you have a vision of just this is the standard boilerplate that would go into most of our software that does the environment variable processing in the same way, or is that a library that helps do that?
Probably. I mean, I used Cobra Viper. I know Jacob's a big fan of FF, which I also like. So I think consolidating on one as a as a org would be beneficial, because then you can have you know, you move from one service to the next and it's the same thing. So that helps. So yeah, that's the only thoughts I have on that.
Going back to what you had said earlier, Nahum, if there was a way for those environment variables to automatically be documented in PB&J, and like the way that could be is if they were instrumented through Viper and through Cobra in that OTel Go project. So if OTel Go didn't just set up init, the init function, but if it also introduced a register function to register Cobra and Viper things, then maybe on the PB&J side, we could call that register function, not get any init behavior, but still get all of the command line, get new command line arguments and get the environment variables, which would get it into the -- help.
I'll be honest, I think it makes sense to make the changes in OTel init Go and have a single init function of OTel init Go that takes arguments that you provide by your own method, as opposed to depending on the environment variable magic. Yeah, I think less magic, not more magic, is the right way forward.
I'm saying it's a box of magic tricks that you can buy and you can use them, but you don't get them for free. So like there'd be a register function. You'd call that register function. Nothing would happen automatically.
But that would mean that like OTel init Go, if it currently is not aware of Viper or whatever, suddenly has to be potentially aware of that stuff, versus just like it can be useful in other ways besides by using environment variables.
That also means PB&J has to use Cobra Viper, which it does not, by the way.
What does it use currently? Does it just do something
FF.
horrible?
So, it does horrible things in other places, but this one it uses FF.
Okay, I'm gonna just call out. I think we've had a great discussion on this, but we should probably move on.
I think I'm on the same page as you now, Chris. So thank you for humoring me with the additional discussion.
Can I throw one last thing out there? In Boots, we created a design philosophy doc that documented a lot of this. And so we had this discussion and then we agreed and we put it, codified it. It's in the repo. And now going forward, you could just point to this. And if there is a clear line that says only func main, let's see if I can, only func main has the right to decide which flags, environment variables, config files are available to the end user, right? And so this topic, at least in Boots, theoretically is solved. So
it's currently being violated too, though, probably. I bet the OTel, it pulled in OTel init Go and is currently violating that philosophy.
Yeah. But the ideal is up there, you know, for us to look at and trying to strive to, right? But so yeah, that kind of pulls some of the wind out of my sail. But yeah, we should try and get design philosophies out there, I think is a good point too, just so that this discussion that we had verbally gets written in code, and then you can just point to it in the future and it doesn't become a sticking point. It just becomes like a linter, right? Like, hey, you failed the linting, or hey, you did something that violated the design philosophy. Can you change it, right? We don't need to like rehash it in PRs. Not that we are or anything, I'm just saying it does help in that matter. So. Okay, sorry, moving on. One last item I think I had, Chris. Oh, Chris, you had one, go.
Yeah, so
PBJ.
I put a change into org. Marcus just merged it actually, but do feel free to go. We can tweak it still, obviously, but it's been out for a while now. It adjusts the requirements that I think Jacob had been talking about for transitioning from like reviewer to approver and so forth. The overview gives a snapshot of the intent and what's actually changed. So overall, the goal is to reduce the time it takes because the project isn't as complicated or as involved as where these requirements came from, which I think was Kubernetes, if I'm not mistaken, which is obviously by comparison much larger, more complicated, harder domain and whatnot. A lot more moving parts. Harder domain is probably a incorrect characterization, but anyway. So reduce that, and then also the other significant change is you can go straight into a reviewer. You don't need to be a member and then a reviewer and stuff like that. You can jump straight to reviewer if you're demonstrating that you're, you know, doing things in code, but in the code base. That was really the goal. It's just designed to lower the barrier to entry.
I think this is great too, because I think we need, personally, I think we need help. And we need to lower that barrier just in general. New project, let's just get as many people on board to help push stuff through and get reviews. It's always, I think it's detrimental as a community when things just sit out there for so long. I mean, personally, I think I missed the last 1 or 2 triage parties even, right? And so that's not helpful either. So yeah, thanks, Chris, for doing that. Thanks for merging that too, Marcus. All right, sorry, I'm going to jump to the next one just because we have 4 minutes. Last item here. This is Tinkerbell org pull request 20. Marcus, this is around org admins. This one's just been sitting out there for a couple of weeks now. Can we push this through? Can we get the new org admins signed and start working on what's next?
Yeah, I was gonna add that to what you were saying last. This was a change, so that PR has been merged, I think.
Oh, PR 20?
Yeah, there's no open PRs on org right now.
As
Oh,
of
sweet.
32 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. Thank you.
So the admin role, we had to decorate that, and I was actually looking for like the text. We talked about it in the PR, but we had to decorate that a little bit to encompass other administrative functions that aren't strictly like GitHub, like having CNCF access, having access to org secrets and org billing and org like other responsibilities involved in keeping the infrastructure running. So there was some changes in that PR related to that, which did make it in some ways to the doc. Maybe we need to touch it up a little bit more though. Responsibilities and privileges of admin I'm looking at. But yeah, so the next step of that would be getting your name on some things. And part of that is going to be the CNCF list.
Sure. Same with Jeremy. I don't think you have full perms, do you? Maybe you do.
I don't believe so. I'll have to look again.
Yes. And then just double check that Matt Anderson and Chris, I don't know how to say his last name, also have the right perms too. But, and then as part of that, personally, what I would love to do is actually the next step after that is to remove all the other folks who don't have it and to get rid of all of the GitHub org teams, because we've already handled governance on a per repo basis. I don't think we need all of the teams. Obviously, I think we can keep 1 or 2, maybe like the 1 admin group and the 1 members group, but all the other groups, in my opinion, we've discussed this, should actually go away because, again, governance is already made per repo. But maybe that's something, Marcus, we can get together with later this week or next. Just kind of clean that up. Or I can do it async once I have the permissions or whatever works. I'm just would love to just keep the process moving. So.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. All right, 1 minute left. Any last thoughts, items, jokes, questions? I think I saw a few folks put in proposals to speak at KubeCon NA. Hopefully somebody gets in. That'd be pretty awesome. But yeah. All right. So next week, if you're watching this video next week, same time, we are doing triage party. Please come. No experience required. Show up. You can listen in. You can join the party, or you can just hang out with us. So thanks everybody for showing up today. Appreciate it. And see y'all online.